My name's Evan. I'm 28 years old, and this story begins at the moment my life completely fell apart. Divorce. You know how it is when everything you've built collapses, and suddenly you realize you've got nothing left. I couldn't go back to my parents' house, so I chose the only place I had left, my grandfather's old home. It sat out in Chatham, Alabama, a small town you wouldn't even find on a map unless you were looking for it. My grandfather had passed a few years back, left the family the house and 10 acres of land. Sounds big, right? Right? But those 10 acres were really just a lonely island surrounded by an ocean of woods. 10 minutes outside town. 10 minutes that felt like a lifetime. I thought I'd like the silence. I told myself I needed that kind of isolation to piece together what was left of me. The house. It was old, but old isn't the right word. It felt alive. The floorboards didn't just creak, they groaned under every step, like the place was complaining about an intruder. The doors stuck so tight you had to throw your shoulder into them to make them move. And when they closed, they slammed shut with a heavy, final thud. And the cold, God, the cold. It wasn't weather, it was a damp kind of chill that seeped up from the foundation itself. You could crank the heater all the way up, but that cold stayed right there, breathing down your neck. But hey, it was free. And a broke 28-year-old fresh off a divorce doesn't get to be picky. The first few nights passed strangely normal. I cleaned up, unpacked, tried to cover the dust of the past with pieces of the present. In the evenings, I'd sit on the porch with a beer. The quiet was unnerving. No cars, no neighbors. Just the wind whispering through the pines. And sometimes, somewhere far off, the lonely cry of an owl. Then the sounds began. Saturday night. I'd just gone to bed. Around midnight. I was half asleep when I heard it. The whistling. It was outside, far away. It wasn't a song. Not even a clear tune. Just a few broken notes, slow and uneven, like someone trying to remember a melody they'd forgotten. Faint, fragile, carried by the wind. It made my skin crawl, but I brushed it off. Probably a hunter, lost out there. Or some drunk neighbor cutting through the woods. I pulled the blanket over my head and tried to sleep. The next night, it came again. Same time, same wrong tune. But this time, closer. So much closer. Like it was standing at the edge of the yard, right where the trees began. My heart slammed once, hard. I got out of bed and flipped on the porch light. The yellow glow barely reached a small wet patch of grass. Everything beyond was just black, nothing. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The air bit at my skin. "Hey!" I called out, my voice shaking. "Who's there?" Nothing. No footsteps. No one running off. Just silence. Then, faintly, the whistle again, retreating into the forest. As if it knew I was listening. I tried to ignore it. Really, I did. For the next few nights, I just stayed in bed, headphones on, blasting music. But it didn't matter. No matter what I did, I could still feel it. And it always started at exactly 1:17 a.m. I know, it sounds absurdly specific, but I swear to you, the clock always read 1:15, 1:19, or dead on 1:17. That precision, that was what drove me insane. It didn't feel human. It felt mechanical, ritualistic. That's when I knew this wasn't random. Someone was playing with me. Someone knew I was out there alone. And they were enjoying my fear. I called the sheriff's office. A deputy, old guy. I'll call him H. Drove out. He had that tired look of a man who's seen too much nonsense. But when I told him the story, he didn't laugh. He didn't call me crazy. His face just went quiet, heavy. He stared into the tree line for a long time, then turned back to me. He said, "I remember every word. Your grandfather called us about the same thing. Said someone was whistling around the house at night, always in the spring." My stomach dropped. "Spring?" Deputy H nodded. "We patrolled a few times. Never found a damn thing. Honestly, Evan, we thought he was getting old, losing it. But now you're hearing it too." That confirmation, somehow, it was worse than disbelief. My grandfather had never said a word. He'd lived through it, alone. Deputy H put a hand on my shoulder. "Lock your doors," he said quietly, "and stay inside after dark. Whatever you hear out there, don't go looking for it." I did what Deputy H told me to do. I mean, staying inside was the obvious thing, right? That night, I locked everything, checked every latch, every window. I even wedged a heavy chair under the front doorknob, feeling ridiculous, like I was in some bad horror movie. But it didn't matter. The whistling didn't stop, and it wasn't in the woods anymore. It was toying with me. One night, it came from behind the shed. The sound was sharp, clear, like someone standing just a few feet from my bedroom window. I froze, grabbed my flashlight, and barely dared to lift the curtain. Nothing, just the yard, soaked in dew. I didn't go outside. I couldn't. I felt eyes on me, watching, studying. The next night, it was at the front porch, right outside the main door. 3 long, high-pitched whistles, then sudden silence. And that silence, that's what really drove me mad. Then came the worst night. The sound came from beneath me. I'm not joking. I swear to God, it was coming from under the floorboards. Like something, or someone, crawling through the crawl space. That narrow, filthy stretch of darkness right below me. The weak, off-key whistle floated up through the vents. I could hear the faint ring of metal. The house wasn't my shelter anymore. It had been breached from the foundation up. I didn't sleep a second that night. I just sat on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, eyes locked on the vent, waiting for the sun to rise. The next morning, I was on the edge of losing my mind. I needed answers. I climbed up into the attic and tore through old boxes. I had to find something. And I did. A box full of my grandfather's journals. My hands were shaking as I flipped through the yellowed pages. Then I saw it. He wrote about the whistling. Said it happened for over 10 years. Every spring. He didn't know who it was. He only wrote that he felt someone watching the house. He wrote that he used to sit awake all night, rifle in hand, by the window. And then I read the line that froze my blood. It only happens when I'm alone, after she passed. I called Deputy H right away. My voice must have sounded desperate because he showed up fast. He read the journal page, and his tired face went from weary to genuinely worried. He looked at me. "Evan, I'm serious," he said. "Don't open the door, no matter what you hear." Then something even worse happened. Silence. 2 days. 2 nights. Not a sound, no whistling, nothing. You'd think I'd be relieved, right? I wasn't. It was the kind of silence stretched tight, the silence of a predator waiting in the dark. On the 3rd night, I couldn't stay awake anymore. I was drained. I went to bed, but I left the hallway light on, just in case. 1:17 a.m., I jolted awake. Not the whistle this time. A new sound. A sound that stopped my heart. Knocking. Slow. Steady. 3 times. And it was coming from inside the house. From the back door. Then silence. I lay there, completely still, barely breathing. I could hear the rush of blood in my ears. A minute passed. Then, creak. The floorboard in the hallway. Another one. Creak. Someone was walking in my hallway, and right then, The hallway light, my small piece of safety, flickered out. I grabbed my shotgun. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. I stumbled out of the bedroom. The hallway was pitch black, but not completely. Moonlight from the living room window spilled just enough for me to see something. A figure. Dressed in black, standing perfectly still, only a few feet away. And the face. In that dim light, it looked pale, expressionless, just standing there, watching me. I raised the gun, barrel trembling. "Don't move," I shouted, my voice cracking. In the dark, the figure slowly turned, like it was bored. "Stop!" I screamed again, and then it bolted, moved faster than anything human should. Heavy, pounding footsteps tore toward the front door. I ran after it, panicking, heart racing. I burst out onto the porch, lifted the gun, and fired. The blast ripped through the night. "Don't come back!" I screamed into the emptiness. My ears rang, sharp and deafening. The shotgun blast echoed through the woods, bouncing off the trees and rolling into the dark. Then came the silence, heavy, suffocating, worse than the shot itself. I stood there trembling, the smell of gunpowder thick in my nose. No scream, no body hitting the ground, just crickets and the wind. I didn't go back inside. I didn't grab my wallet, didn't grab my phone, didn't grab anything. I ran straight to the truck, hands shaking so hard I dropped the keys twice before I got them in the ignition. I slammed the locks and floored it. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to leave. That night, I slept in the truck. Well, not really slept. I parked in the lot of a closed-down grocery store in town, under the only working streetlight. I sat there, shotgun on the seat beside me, staring into the dark, my whole body still trembling. As soon as the sun came up, I called Deputy H. He met me there, and we drove back to the house together. I didn't even want to step out of the truck. Daylight didn't make it feel any safer. And then we saw it. The front door. The one I'd slammed shut and locked in a panic the night before, was open, just slightly ajar, a sliver of black. My heart dropped. We went inside. Nothing was broken. Nothing was missing. But Deputy H confirmed what I already feared. There were no signs of forced entry. No damage. Nothing. He didn't break in. He didn't pick a lock. He had a key. All this time, he'd had my grandfather's key. That feeling of violation. It was worse than fear. H looked at me, and his face said everything before he even spoke. "Evan, change the locks. Right now. And then, listen to me. Leave this place. It's not meant for you." I didn't need him to say it twice. I drove straight to the hardware store, still shaking, bought the best set of locks they had, changed them myself, right there in broad daylight. But even then, I couldn't stop glancing toward the tree line. Then I left, tossed my bags into the truck, and drove straight to my parents' place. In another state. I never went back. My dad handled the sale. We only returned once, in the daytime, to grab a few of my grandfather's old things. Dad kept the story quiet. I don't know if he ever told the new owners. God, I hope he didn't. I moved to the city. I needed the noise. I needed cars, sirens, neighbors. That experience, it ruined silence for me. I still don't know who or what it was. I don't know how they had the key or why they chose my grandfather and me. But sometimes, when I wake in the middle of the night, in that rare second of quiet, before the city breathes again, I swear I can still hear it. A broken little tune, whistled, right outside my window. I'm 16 now, living in the city, but those first 8 years out in the countryside, they left marks that never really faded. Some memories don't go away, and some, I wish I could erase. The kind that feel more like nightmares than anything real. The place I grew up was a tiny village, almost completely cut off from the rest of the world. The population, maybe 90 people at most. You might think it's strange that my parents let a 7-year-old wander around unsupervised all day, but out there, that was normal. We lived in what everyone called the bubble, the kind of safety that makes you careless. Everyone knew everyone, and I mean really knew them. We recognized who owned what car just by glancing at the license plate. There was no such thing as a stranger. Every face was familiar. And that, my friends, is the most dangerous thing about a place like that. You get programmed to believe that evil can't live there. You'd be wrong. It was one of those brutal summer days, the kind where the heat feels alive, clinging to your skin like syrup. I was 7. My friend, I'll call him Julian, and I were dying of thirst. Our throats burned, and we would have killed for a cold can of Coke. Back then, soda at the little corner store was cheap, but we didn't have a dime. Then, as if by luck, or maybe a trap, an old woman called to us from her porch. She said her birthday was coming up, and she needed mint leaves for tea. Lots of them. She smiled, squinting kindly at us, and promised that if we filled 2 plastic bags full of mint, she'd buy us as much soda as we wanted. As much as we wanted. To 2 dehydrated 7-year-olds, that wasn't an offer. That was a holy quest. We set off right away, laughing and determined. But the heat was merciless. The sun felt like a furnace, roasting us alive. Sweat glued our shirts to our backs. We searched every patch of grass, every garden corner we knew, but after an hour, we barely had half a bag. Frustration crept in. We were tired, cranky, desperate for some miracle, a big bush of mint, or anything at all. And that's when, out of nowhere, they appeared. They didn't come out of a house, or step from a road. They just appeared, as if they'd walked straight out from the rows of sun-scorched corn. 2 tall figures. And when I say tall, they were probably around 5'7". But through the eyes of a 7-year-old, they looked like giants, and right away, something felt off. It was their clothes. In that 38-degree heat, when the air itself felt thick enough to drown in, both of them were dressed in black. Heavy hoodies, hoods pulled tight, skinny pants. I remember thinking, how are they even breathing in that? They couldn't have been older than 17, though it was hard to tell. Their faces were lost in the shadows of those dark hoods. One of them spoke, and that voice, it still haunts me. It tried to sound friendly, but there was something wrong. It was too careful, too rehearsed. Like an adult forcing his tone higher, pretending to be younger, every word measured, every pause unnatural. "You kids out here alone?" Julian turned to me right away. I saw his shoulders stiffen. He didn't say a word, but his eyes were screaming. He gave the smallest nod toward the village, a signal that meant we should leave. But back then, I was terrible at reading signals. I didn't understand. Childhood innocence. It's a dangerous thing. My thirst and the promise of soda had blinded me. I smiled at them and said brightly, "Yeah, we're just looking for mint leaves." Then I even asked if they knew where we could find some. "We've been looking forever. It's so hot." I can't say for sure, but I have this flash of memory. One of them smirked. It wasn't a smile. It was the grin of a fox that just found the henhouse door wide open. The quiet one suddenly crouched down next to me. The air around him reeked of sweat trapped under heavy fabric. Then he reached out and patted my head. Before I could react, Julian moved. He didn't just pull me away. He yanked me back hard, putting himself between me and that guy. In that instant, every trace of playfulness vanished. Julian's face hardened, serious, tense, afraid. He looked up at them and used our village's safety code. "Who are your parents? You have to understand, where I grew up, that wasn't a polite question. It was a test. You had to answer with a family name. The village was so small that everyone was connected, generations deep. Asking who your parents were was how we confirmed you belonged. Julian was born there. He knew every family. That's why he was scared, because he didn't recognize them. And the fact that they were hanging around, talking to two little kids, dressed like that, and had touched me. Every alarm bell in his head was screaming. And just like he feared, they dodged the question. The one who spoke first laughed, that same strange, artificial laugh. "Oh, we're just passing through." Then he turned to me, his tone syrupy and fake. "Actually, we just came from a big field of mint. You see that hill over there? That's where it is. We could take you there, help you fill your bags. Way more than what you've got now." Of course, we knew that hill. Julian and I and the other kids used to play hide and seek there at night. It was fun. But I knew one thing for sure. There were no mint plants up there. Just corn, grapes, and a few rows of watermelons. And yet, once again, I proved just how stupidly naive I was. Every warning sign, the clothes, the voice, the avoidance, the lie about the mint, I ignored them all. The promise of more and the thought of endless soda drowned out any sense of danger. I nodded eagerly, tugging at Julian's arm. He stood frozen, stiff as stone, but I kept pulling until he moved. The two figures seemed pleased. They turned and started walking, and we, like two clueless lambs, followed them. The farther we walked, the thicker the air seemed to become. Julian's hand was still clutching mine, trembling. And then, finally, I felt it too. Not the heat, but a chill, sliding down my spine, even as sweat kept pouring down my back. I looked over my shoulder. The village was gone, swallowed by the cornfields and the narrow dirt path. We had gone too far. Ahead of us, the woods loomed, dark and silent. And just as I knew all along, there was no field of mint, only cracked dirt and brittle trees. Cold sweat broke across my palms. Panic spread through my veins, numb and electric. I knew we'd been tricked. I knew something terrible was about to happen. And yet, I couldn't stop walking. My legs kept moving, as if they no longer belonged to me. I was certain that if we turned back now, something truly awful would happen. Then, softly, Julian leaned close to my ear. His breath came in shaky bursts. I will never, ever forget what he whispered. It was quiet, but louder than any scream. "These guys aren't right. Run." He didn't wait for me to respond. Julian yanked my arm, and we bolted. We tore down the hill, not caring about the rocks or the thorns tearing at our legs. Behind us came shouting, that fake friendly voice gone, replaced by furious growls. I heard their footsteps pounding hard against the dry earth, closing in. I started crying, silent, breathless sobs that burned my throat. I wasn't even sure I was breathing anymore. I just knew my legs were moving. Julian's grip was crushing, painful even, but it kept me alive, kept me moving forward. I don't know how two 7-year-olds managed to run nearly 2 kilometers without stopping. Maybe adrenaline did that, but at some point, when the first rooftops of the village shimmered through my tears, I realized something. The footsteps were gone. They had stopped chasing us. They hadn't followed us back into the village, as if they knew exactly where the boundary was, and that the hunt had ended. The old woman was the first to see us. We looked like ghosts, pale, drenched in sweat and tears. She stayed calm, brought us inside, handed us chocolate. When we finally stopped shaking, she asked what had happened. My mouth wouldn't move, but Julian spoke, and when he finished, He did something I'll never forget. He lied. He told her that I'd been scared and didn't want to go, that it was his idea to follow those men, and that I had only come along because he insisted. He took all the blame. Julian was grounded for a month. I wasn't. It took me a long time to really recover from that day. I never found out who those men were or what they wanted from us. But now, years later, I think I can guess, and the thought makes me sick. When we ran, I could have tripped. That hill was steep, dangerous. If it weren't for Julian, the boy who never let go of my hand, not even for a second, the boy who's now my boyfriend, I don't even want to imagine what those men would have done to us. When I was little, my parents worked like maniacs. Both of them had 2 jobs, the kind that drain every ounce of energy from dawn till midnight. They had to keep food on the table for me and my older brother, Cameron. Those jobs gave us what we needed, but they also took Mom and Dad away from us almost all the time. So they went online and hired a babysitter, a young white woman, maybe in her early 20s. Her name was Michelle. For about 4 or 5 months, Michelle came over every weekday. I was 7, Cam was 8. We both adored her. She was young, polite, and most importantly, full of energy. That meant we could actually play with her, instead of being stuck with some grumpy old lady who'd rather nap than talk to kids. Cam and I were homeschooled, since my parents' schedules were too packed to drive us to school. Michelle helped a lot with our lessons too. She was like the big sister we never had. When summer came, my parents told Michelle she should take a break. They wanted her to enjoy her summer, especially after everything she'd done for us. But that also meant we'd be without a babysitter. My parents didn't want to go through the hassle of finding another one they could trust. So they decided to send Cam and me straight to Grandma and Grandpa's house. They lived out in Texas, deep in the countryside, far from our home in Oklahoma. And when I say far, I mean a whole different world. Rural Texas isn't just farmland, it's isolation. The kind of place where your nearest neighbor lives a mile away. But the trip was worth it, because we'd get to stay there the entire summer. The weekend came, and on Saturday, we hit the road. The drive was pretty, but to a 7-year-old, it was also the longest, most boring, most nausea-inducing experience ever. After what felt like forever, we finally arrived. A medium-sized cabin-style house sat alone in the middle of a vast field, and right behind it, the woods. Those woods, they always gave me a strange feeling. Dense, dark. Even in daylight, well, they looked like a wall of trees shutting out the sun. Off to one side was a small barn where my grandparents kept cows, goats, chickens, and a few other animals that made the place feel alive. We said our hellos. Grandpa immediately wanted to show Cam and me around the property. My parents stayed inside to chat with Grandma, who was already cooking dinner. That night was perfect. We laughed, we talked, and we played with their dog, Cora. She was a big German shepherd, loyal, sharp-eyed. But that night, I noticed something. She seemed restless. Her ears kept twitching toward the woods, like she could hear something out there that we couldn't. When it was time for bed, Cam and I shared a room with a bunk bed and an old TV. The room next to ours belonged to my parents. They fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted from the long drive, and knowing they had to leave first thing in the morning to get back to work. Cam and I stayed up a little longer, watching cartoons. The sound of the TV was the only thing breaking the heavy, country silence. After a while, we both drifted off to sleep, the TV still flickering softly in the dark. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up. Something was moving outside my window, and it wasn't the light scurrying of a small animal. These were footsteps, heavy, slow, crushing gravel and dry twigs underfoot. I couldn't see a thing because the curtains were drawn, but I could hear it clearly. The old TV was still running, playing cartoons, and Cam was sound asleep, but I was wide awake. The footsteps stopped, right beneath my window. I held my breath. Then came a sound, faint but sharp, like metal scraping against wood. A few seconds later, a soft grunt, the kind you make when you're holding your breath to force something open. Someone was trying to pry our window. My heart went wild. I climbed down from the bunk bed and ran into my parents' room, shaking them awake, whispering fast. They stirred, half asleep, looking annoyed. Of course, they didn't believe me. They thought it was just a kid's imagination. But they still went to check. Nothing. Just the thick Texas night and the endless hum of crickets. My dad brushed it off, said it was probably a raccoon or something. After all, we were out in the middle of nowhere, and my 7-year-old brain could have made the whole thing up. I crawled back into bed, but it took forever to fall asleep again. And when I did, it wasn't a peaceful sleep. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of Grandma's cooking. My parents were packing up, getting ready to leave. Breakfast was warm and cheerful, so normal. It almost convinced me that the night before had just been a bad dream. Then Mom and Dad drove off. I watched their car shrink down the dusty road until it vanished. And that's when the unease hit me. We were on our own now. After they left, Grandpa took Cam and me out to feed the animals. He brought Cora along for a walk, and I asked if I could hold her leash. He handed it to me, told me to keep a good grip. We were following the trail that led toward the woods when Cora started acting strange. Every few seconds she'd stop, sniffing at the air. I tugged the leash, annoyed, until I realized she wasn't distracted. She was frozen. Every hair on her back stood straight up. She was staring at something, staring at the woods. A low, deep growl rumbled in her chest. A chill ran through me, and I looked where she was looking. That's when I saw it. A figure, a man, dressed head to toe in black, just standing there, watching us. Even though his face was hidden, I could feel his eyes on us. He was pressed up against a tree, both hands on the bark, like he was pretending to hide, but his whole body was showing. He wasn't moving. He was just there, a shadow that didn't belong in daylight. I turned to call Grandpa, but he and Cam were already a ways up the path. I shouted, running toward them, "Diane," dragging Cora, who was digging her paws into the dirt. When I pointed back to the trees to show him, the man was gone, completely gone. No sound of leaves, no branches snapping, just gone. Grandpa had heard about what happened last night, so when I told him, I knew he believed me. I caught a flicker of worry on his face, then he quickly masked it. He said it was probably a deer in the distance, and that my shouting had scared it off. We went back after feeding the animals. The rest of the day was calm. Movies, sprinklers, laughter, almost enough to forget. That night, Grandma cooked another big dinner. I ate until I was half asleep, took a quick 10-minute shower, and crawled into bed. Cartoons played softly in the background. Then we drifted off. Around 1 in the morning, I woke up again. This time, it wasn't footsteps. It was humming, right outside the window, very close. Someone was humming along to the Cyber Chase theme song, the same one playing on the TV. Cam was dead asleep, curtains still shut, but I knew it wasn't my imagination. That was a person. At first, I thought maybe Grandpa's outside having a smoke. Maybe he heard the TV and just started humming along. It sounded dumb, but I was 7, so I called out, "Grandpa." The humming stopped instantly. 30 seconds of silence. Heavy, thick. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then a voice. "Hey, it's Grandpa. Come on out, kiddo. Got something cool to show you." Something was wrong. The voice was too smooth, too soft. Not Grandpa's rough, gravelly tone. But I was half asleep and confused. I slipped on my shoes and stepped outside. The sky was clear. full of stars. I walked around toward the side of the house, where my window was. Someone was standing there. Grandpa?" I said. He reached out his hand. I took it, and he started leading me toward the barn, farther and farther from the house. I tried to talk, to ask where we were going, but he didn't answer. Only the sound of our footsteps crunching over the dirt. Then I started thinking, why would Grandpa be out here at 1 a.m? Why was he wearing a hood pulled low over his face? I looked down at the hand holding mine. Really looked at it. That wasn't Grandpa's hand. His hands were rough, dry, calloused. This one was soft, damp, younger. I tried to pull away. The grip tightened, like iron. I was terrified, but I didn't want him to know I'd figured it out. So I stayed quiet, heart hammering. Then I saw it, sticking out from behind his waistband. A wooden handle, long and dark. That's when panic hit me for real. Suddenly, I heard my grandpa's real voice calling from inside the house. "Hey, who's out there?" I froze. Didn't even breathe. The man turned his head toward the voice. That was my chance. I yanked my hand free with every bit of strength I had and stumbled backward. He stood there for one long second, realizing the game was over. Then he bolted, straight into the woods. I turned and ran as fast as I could, screaming for help, my voice tearing through the night. I burst through the door, nearly tripping over the rug. Grandpa was already there. He grabbed me, scooped me up, and held me tight. I couldn't stop shaking, silent sobs racking through my chest. Behind him, Grandma stood frozen, her face pale as paper, clutching the phone, repeating our address over and over to 911. Out here, in the middle of nowhere. You'd think the cops would take an hour to show up. But that night, we heard sirens, faint at first, then louder, cutting through the quiet country dark. Red and blue lights washed over the fields, flashing against the trees, turning my grandparents' peaceful farm into a crime scene. They poured out of their cars, flashlights slicing through the dark, radios crackling with static. They found him. He hadn't made it far. He was hiding, curled up like an animal, in a shallow drainage ditch not far from the house. He didn't fight. And beside him, in that ditch, they found a few things. A coil of rope, a roll of duct tape, and, just like I saw, a hatchet tucked into his waistband. A hatchet. He brought a hatchet to show me something cool. When they investigated, they discovered the lock on Grandpa's shed had been broken. The scraping sound, the metal against wood I'd heard that first night. It was him, digging through Grandpa's tools. A few days later, the whole sick story came out. He wasn't some random drifter. He was Michelle's ex-boyfriend. Let's call him Dave. He confessed he'd been following us. He knew my parents' schedules. He knew Michelle had quit. He knew we were coming to Texas. He followed us, all the way from Oklahoma. He was the shadow in the woods. The footsteps outside my window. His plan was to take me. He thought grabbing a 7-year-old girl would be easier than my brother. His motive? Michelle loved me. He planned to use me to threaten her, to force her back to him. He claimed he never really meant to hurt me. But let me tell you, you don't bring rope, duct tape, and a hatchet to meet a child at 1 a.m. unless you mean to do something terrible. After everything, my parents drove straight to Texas, picked us up the same day. That whole ordeal changed them. They started looking for new jobs, so they could stay home more. They let Michelle go, and two, which was sad, because she was a victim in all of this, just like us. I'm thankful the police station wasn't too far away. But what I'm most grateful for, what I thank God for every single day, is that Grandpa woke up that night to use the bathrooms. One random moment, one small, ordinary thing, and it saved my life. Even now, 20 years later, I still shiver when I think about it. What if I hadn't looked at that hand? What if Grandpa hadn't called out at that exact second? I would have gone with him. To the barn. And then what? The place I grew up in sat right next to a national park. It was beautiful, the kind of wild, untouched beauty that made you feel small. But the rules there were strict. No bikes, no horses, basically. Walking only. But when you're 10 years old, those signs don't feel like rules. They feel like dares. Especially when the dirt trails winding through that forest look so perfect for riding. My family raised horses. So, you can guess what happened next. I used to sneak one of them out and ride into the park. I knew I wasn't supposed to, and yeah, I got caught a few times. But nothing ever really happened. Just a half-hearted warning from some ranger telling me not to do it again. And to a 10-year-old, half-hearted means permission granted, so I kept doing it. That little habit kept going, until one morning, the first morning of summer break, the morning that changed everything. That day was beautiful. But the fog was unreal, thick and white, swallowing the world whole, turning the forest into something completely different. To me, it felt like a perfect cloak, an invisible shield. It was still early, before 6, probably. Too early for anyone else to be out there. I was sure I had the trail all to myself. I kicked the horse into a full run. It felt incredible, her hooves striking the damp earth, the sound echoing softly in the stillness of morning. There was nothing but rhythm and silence. The kind of peace that makes you forget everything else. I only slowed her down when we reached the part I always thought of as the dangerous stretch. A narrow slope, with a cliff on one side, dropping straight down into a rushing river. The thought of one wrong step, one slip, was enough to make even a reckless kid like me nervous. That was my line, my one safety rule. But that morning, the cliff wasn't what I needed to fear. Something else was waiting for me in that fog. Something far, far worse. Everything was fine, until the horse suddenly stopped. Not a slow pull on the reins. It froze. Front legs locked, hooves digging into the dirt, and I nearly went flying over its neck. She wouldn't take another step. You know, I grew up around horses. I could read them. When they act like that, it's always one of two things. Either their hooves hurt, or they've seen something that terrified them. And when I looked at her, she was trembling. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the fog ahead. That wasn't stubbornness. That was fear. Raw, animal fear. I pressed my heels gently into her sides. She just stepped back, snorting hard. My heart started to pound. What was she seeing? That I couldn't. Then my eyes caught it. At first, it was just mist, nothing but gray and white. But then, a glint, a faint metallic flash. A wire, thin as threads on, almost invisible in the fog. It stretched across the trail, pulled tight between two trees, and it was at the perfect height, right at the neck of a runner. Or a 10-year-old kid on horseback. I froze. The air around me felt heavy, thick. The forest wasn't silent anymore. It was holding its breath, and somewhere deep inside, I felt it. Someone was watching me. I couldn't take the wire down, and I wasn't about to test it. The only way was around. I slid off the saddle, guiding my horse through the wet brush at the edge of the trail. Branches slapped against my face, cold and slick with dew, and then I heard it, singing. A thin, sharp voice, high, almost inhuman. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't right. The melody was familiar. An old Swedish Christmas tune called Hey Tomte Gubar. But the lyrics, God, the lyrics were different. That cheerful little song was twisted, turned into something cruel. All I could make out was one line. Runners passing by. Let your lifeblood flow. I didn't breathe, didn't move. Just backed away, climbed onto the horse, and rode. As fast as she could go. I didn't care about the cliff anymore. I rode that horse home without looking back once. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. But the real storm was in my head. I knew I had to tell someone. That wire. That voice in the fog. It wasn't a prank. It couldn't be. But the second I said anything, I'd have to admit I'd been riding a horse inside a restricted park. And I knew what that meant. Trouble. Big trouble. Then that image flashed in my mind again, the wire glinting in the mist. And suddenly, getting punished didn't seem like much of a problem anymore. Not compared to what could have happened. I remembered the stories kids used to whisper around here about a crazy old man who lived somewhere deep in the woods, in a wooden shack no one could ever find. We all thought it was just a scary story, something to tell around a campfire. But after what I'd just seen, it didn't feel like a story anymore. It felt real. Too real. When I got home, I ran straight to my room and told my older brother everything. I must have looked pale as a ghost, because he believed me right away. He didn't say a word, just grabbed his bike, and we went back, on foot this time. The wire was still there, pulled tight, deadly. And when we searched around a bit more, he found it. Not far from there, just beyond a fallen log people often jumped over while running, a stake, sharpened to a perfect point, sticking straight up from the ground. Anyone jumping that log would have landed right on it. Whoever set it up had planned everything perfectly. My throat went dry. That's when we called the police. They didn't take it lightly. They swept the entire area, and yeah, they found more traps, even worse ones. But there was no sign of the man, no shack, no footprints, no one. It all went quiet after that, for a while at least. Then, the next summer, the news broke. They'd found the same kind of sharpened stakes again. This time, beneath the water, right under the old diving tower where we used to play at the lake. And on the narrow bridge over the river, someone had left black garbage bags filled with rocks, placed just so, that if a car hit one, it could go straight off the edge. That's when it hit me. Whoever he was still out there. And he wasn't just after joggers anymore. He was after all of us. This story comes from my father. It happened back in the early 50s, when he was just a little kid, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and I'm going to tell it to you exactly the way he told it to me. My dad grew up in a place most of us can't even picture anymore, a family farm, isolated in a way that feels almost unreal today. You have to imagine it. The nearest neighbor was nearly a quarter-mile away, and there wasn't a paved road in sight. You'd have to cross over wooded hills before you could even see another house. And here's the thing. The farm had no electricity. None. That didn't just mean no lights. It meant that when the sun went down, the world outside turned into a solid wall of darkness, pitch black. They didn't even have a phone. Not until 1984. So if something happened out there was no calling for help. Whatever came their way, they had to face it alone. That isolation, that's what set the stage for what was about to happen. One afternoon, my grandfather sent my dad's older brother into town, to the feed mill, to collect payment for the harvest. He told him to take cash, so he could pay the taxes and put the rest in savings. That night, my uncle came home with it. A season's worth of work, a small fortune in cash, sitting inside that lonely farmhouse, surrounded by nothing but darkness. And then it happened. Around 2 in the morning. You have to understand, 2 a.m. on a farmhouse with no electricity. That's a heavy quiet, almost suffocating. The thing that woke them, it wasn't a sound. It was the light, a pair of headlights, suddenly aimed right at the house, blinding, tearing through the dark. Headlights at that hour, out there. That's never good news. That wasn't company. That was an intruder. My grandfather didn't waste a second on panic. He rolled straight out of bed, but not up. He crawled, keeping low beneath the windowsills. This was pure instinct. He moved through his own darkness, into my father and uncle's room, shook my uncle hard. Nobody said a word. In that situation, words are a waste. They knew instantly. In the near total black, the two men moved downstairs. This wasn't about seeing what was wrong. This was a counterattack. My uncle went to the back door, cutting off the retreat. My grandfather went straight for the front. He didn't just open it. He exploded through it, so fast he almost cleared the steps, charging right at the approaching man. The driver, he was out of the car, almost all the way to the house. Probably thought it was an easy score, a sleeping house. He was wrong. When he saw one shape burst from the shadows, and then a second one right after, he froze. He turned, ran for the car. My grandfather was right on him. He barely made it to the driver's seat. My grandfather got a hand on the steering wheel. They were fighting, right there in the doorframe. The engine roared. He somehow hit the gas. The car lurched and took off. My grandfather chased it a short way down the dirt road, yelling into the dark, but he was gone. And it was then, as they both stood there catching their breath in the cold air, they realized something worse. Further down the road, under a cluster of trees, a second car. It had been waiting. The second it saw the first car get away, it gunned its engine, sped off, and vanished into the night. They were stunned. This wasn't some petty thief. This was organized. And they had just faced it, alone. Those men got away. The blessing of that night. No one was hurt. But when the sound of those two engines finally faded, the silence that was left behind, that was the terrifying part. It carried the truth of just how close they had been. The very next morning, my grandfather and uncle drove to town. They went straight to the sheriff's office, laid out the whole story. They were expecting an investigation, at least some kind of reassurance. But the answer they received, it was colder than the air that night. The sheriff listened, nodded, then looked them right in the eye and said, "You go buy rifles. If it happens again, you do what you have to do to defend yourselves." That was it. No promises. No patrols were coming. Just a cold acknowledgement that out there, that isolated, the law was never going to get there in time. They were the only protection they had. Their next stop was the hardware store. They bought the rifles, one for my grandfather, one for each of my uncles. Those rifles weren't just weapons. They were an acceptance of a new reality. It never happened again. And as far as my father knows, those visitors, the ones with the second car waiting, they were never caught. They just dissolved into history, but they left a lesson that didn't. You know, this story happened at least 60 years ago, more than 30 years before I was even born. And yet, it has shaped my views on self-reliance more than anything else. It feels more real than the 2 times in the last 5 years when I've had to call 911 myself during an emergency, and the only thing that answered was that dead, automated voice. All operators are currently busy. Please, do not hang up. Life taught my grandfather, my father, and me a 3-generation lesson. When things truly go wrong, when the danger is right at your door, you are fundamentally on your own, for at least the first 15 minutes. My father's telling of it. It also showed the power of numbers. That night, it was 2 brave men, charging out instead of hiding. In a modern context, that might be the number of rounds in a magazine. Because the final lesson is, you never truly know what's out there, and whether or not it's driving down your road right now. What I'm about to tell you, it sounds wild, even made up. I know, but I swear to you, every detail, it happened, and there are witnesses. I've always thought this wasn't supernatural, not a haunting, and I think that makes it even more terrifying. To understand this, you have to first understand where I live. I don't live in the suburbs. I live somewhere, truly remote. You have to drive off the main highway, go down a long, long dirt road just to get to our private property. My house is tucked in, among my relatives' houses. My neighbors are my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, older people. They're in bed by 9 p.m. Their kids are all gone. So, there are no pranks, no troubled teenagers. This place, it's quiet. The silence out there is different. It's thick. It fills your ears. It almost has weight. At night, the only thing you can hear is the ringing in your own head. A few months ago, my mom and I were up late watching TV, probably a weekend. Around 3 in the morning, the witching hour. I turned the TV off. The room fell into that familiar, thick silence. But only for a second. I heard it. Music. No, not normal music. It was carnival music. You know the kind. That sick, cheerful, twisted kind of sound. And it wasn't distant. It was right in my front yard, loud and clear. My mom heard it too. She shot right up, ran to the living room window, pulled back the curtain. But the only thing she saw was darkness. Just pitch black, swallowing everything. All the relatives' houses were dark. They were asleep. And honestly, they're country music people. They would never be playing that. We are miles from the city. This wasn't. Drift. And here's the kicker. We heard no car. Out here, you can hear tires on gravel from a mile away. But that night, nothing. Just the silence, being torn apart by this carnival music. Where was it coming from? Who was playing it? And why, dear God, why at 3 a.m.? A chill went right down my spine. The thought of a stranger, standing in my yard in the dark, playing that music, it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a warning. It suggested malice, a deliberate stalking. A few days later, when my mom told the story, my dad and my uncle, they just froze. They told a story. 20 years ago, when my parents first moved in, they had an electrician over, installing a ceiling light. In the middle of the job, the guy just went stiff, dropped his tools. He was terrified. Said he kept hearing Pink Floyd music coming from the front yard. My dad, who's a little hard of hearing, and my uncle, who was older even then, they didn't hear a thing. They laughed it off, thought the guy was crazy or high. But he was scared, genuinely. He was pale, kept opening the door, looking out. He packed his tools and left right after, never came back. And then, a cold piece clicked into place. I had a realization. The carnival music me and my mom heard, that twisted loop, I went straight to YouTube. I typed in Cyrus Minor by Pink Floyd. I played it. My mom, who has never listened to Pink Floyd, started to panic. Her face went white. She pointed at the speaker, her voice shaking. Yes. Yes. That's it. That's what I heard. A 2-decade coincidence? Who, in the hell, is sitting in my yard at 3 a.m., in the middle of nowhere, playing the exact same song 20 years later? They would have had to walk for miles just to get here. That was bad enough, but that wasn't all. The music wasn't the only thing. We had something else, something much worse, something physical. The knocking on the living room window, around 3 a.m. again. No, it wasn't a knock. It was a punch. It hit so hard, the entire wall of the house shook, and it knocked the heavy sofa that was braced against it over. There are no trees nearby. No animal big enough, high enough to do that. It had to be human. Luckily, that stopped for the past few weeks. At least, we thought it had. After that night, everything just stopped. No more Pink Floyd. No more wall-shaking knocks. That familiar, thick silence of the farm came back. Honestly, I almost convinced myself it was over. Maybe it was just some drunk who got lost, or a sick prank that went too far. I was starting to believe we were safe. But you know, peace in a place like this, it's usually just the quiet before the storm. A few weeks later, I was up, way too late, buried in homework. Probably 2, 3 in the morning again. Suddenly, I hear a noise. This time, it's right outside my bedroom wall. I kill the desk lamp, sit perfectly still in the dark, holding my breath. It sounded like machinery, not a car engine. It was a low whirring, mixed with these dry, metallic clicks, like someone was dismantling something. I couldn't figure out what would make that noise, unless the air conditioner unit right on that wall was dying. But then it stopped. I waited another hour, told myself I was just paranoid, and tried to sleep. 2 nights later, same hour, I hear a sharp screech, a sound of stressed, bending metal. It was sharp, and it was final. The next morning, my dad found it. Someone had sabotaged our AC unit, and this wasn't simple vandalism. This person was methodical. First, they had removed a critical mechanical part from inside. That was the whirring I heard. And then, 2 nights later, they came back and threw that same part into the fan while it was spinning. That was the screech. The blades were completely destroyed. And remember, that unit is attached to my bedroom wall. They were standing just feet from where I was sleeping. We called the repairman. He looked at the mess, shook his head, and said it plain. "I've been doing this 30 years, he said. "This doesn't just happen." He was insistent. Someone took screws out and did this deliberately. This wasn't a joke anymore. This was an invasion. This was targeted sabotage. A few days later, the new unit just installed, my mom was getting ready for a doctor's appointment when she started screaming. From the yard, our main breaker box, the metal panel on the side of the house, it was open. The door was just ajar, like someone was trying to figure out how to cut the power to the whole house. Or worse, disable a security system they thought we had. The wind doesn't do that. Someone had to stand there with tools and open it. They were probing, looking for a weakness. This sent a shockwave through the farm. But weeks went by, and nothing. And my parents, unbelievably, chose to ignore it. My dad tried to brush it off, called the AC thing a freak incident. They bought a new gun, put it by the bed, and that was that. Then, early summer, my grandfather mentioned something. A few weeks back, while my family was on vacation, he saw a red Jeep, way too bright for out here, drive all the way up our long road, right to my house, in broad daylight. My grandfather stopped him, asked him what he wanted. The man mumbled something about looking for a woman in a trailer, and said a name. The punchline, it was the name of a family friend who lives hours away. A blatant lie. My grandfather didn't buy it and told him to leave immediately. Now, everyone was scared. My family on the farm, they started reinforcing doors, installing new locks. They stopped letting their kids play in the yard. They wouldn't even let them walk home from the bus stop. I was busy, getting ready to move out of state for school. But the very night before I left, the old knocking returned. This time, 10 p.m. earlier. My parents were watching TV. They heard it. Just a light tap. They turned on the porch light, looked out, nothing. I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I'm in the living room alone, trying to finish a movie. Suddenly, a punch. Like someone put their whole fist straight into the glass of the living room window. I jumped, so tired and so scared. I took a thick blanket and I covered it. Stupid, I know, but I just wanted it to go away. An hour later, 4 a.m., I hear a noise from the back porch, near the kitchen. The creak of a floorboard, like someone just stepped onto it. But it was just the one sound. They didn't walk around. They just stood there, perfectly still, in the dark, right outside the door, listening. About 10 minutes later, I hear the knocking again. This time, it wasn't on the living room window, the one I had just covered. It had moved to a different window, further down the wall, right next to the sofa. 3 knocks, deliberate, hard enough to shake the wall. That's when I realized, this person isn't just coming, knocking, and leaving. They are lingering for hours. They're probing. They knew we covered that window, so they moved to the next one. They knew we were awake. They were playing with us. I woke up my mom. We sat in the kitchen together until the sun came up. That morning, we made a list. All the little pieces we had ignored before, like the strong smell of cigarettes that would just appear around the bedroom windows. No one in my house smokes. Or other times, a sharp chemical smell, acrid like ammonia, and my aunt's dogs barking wildly in the middle of the night, and the motion sensor light at my grandfather's house clicking on for no reason. My mom and I decided we would convince my dad to get cameras, even though I thought we should be calling the police right now. But he was already in denial. His denial, his refusal to face what was happening, it felt more helpless than the person stalking us from the outside. I kept saying it. My mom kept saying it. But my dad never installed the cameras. I moved out of state, started my new life. The camera issue, because of that, it just got put on the back burner. But it ate at me. A few months later, once I was settled, I called home. I offered to pay for everything. "I'll buy them," I said. "Have them delivered. You won't have to do a thing." Only then, with no more excuses, he confessed. His voice got small over the phone. He said, "Honey, I'm scared." He was too terrified of what he might see on the footage, too scared to face the truth. He had this almost childlike idea that if he didn't see it, if he ignored it long enough, the problem would just go away. And the ironic thing? He was right. The problem did solve itself. Not long after I moved, my grandfather was driving home and saw police cars at another house on the farm, the house of a widowed relative. She was elderly, and honestly, we all stayed away. She was difficult. An officer walked up to my grandfather's truck. "Are you the property owner? We need to talk about your tenants." My grandfather was confused. Tenants? She lives alone. And that's when it all unraveled. The whole dirty truth. It turns out, as soon as our relative's husband had passed, this elderly widow had secretly moved her entire family in. A family we didn't even know existed. A family of addicts and chronic unemployment. Her daughter, her son-in-law, the son-in-law's brother, and her grandson. Because we never visited, and because they didn't have cars, their existence was perfectly hidden. The police were there that day because of a 911 call from inside the house. The grandson, the one with a history of violence, had flown into a rage and started destroying things. When the police arrived and ran his name, it all came out. He had warrants for assault and for the manufacturing of methamphetamine. Meth. Everything flashed in my head. The chemical smell, that acrid ammonia or perm solution smell we got outside the windows. He wasn't just on it. He was cooking it right there, a few hundred yards from our house. And then, the police had told us about his history. The guy was older, and he had a rap sheet that went back over 20 years. A cold washed over me. He wasn't a stranger. He was the one who was there 21 years ago. He was the young man who scared that electrician off with the Pink Floyd music. This was his old stomping ground. It all fit together, horribly. Why there was no car? He didn't need one. He lived there. He just had to walk across the field. The 3 a.m. knocking, the AC sabotage, the probing of the electrical box. That wasn't a prank. That was the behavior of a violent, paranoid meth addict who was hiding from the law. He knew this property, and he knew we were the only ones close enough to discover him. Even the man in the red Jeep. We figured it out. Almost certainly a customer looking to buy, or a supplier. That family friend name was just a code. The nightmare ended, not with an exorcism, but with a pair of handcuffs. The biggest threat to my family was never a ghost from the past. It was a very real, very human monster cooking meth and living right next door. Do you ever get that weird feeling that something is just wrong, even if you can't point to exactly what it is? That chill down your spine when you should be feeling relaxed. People call it intuition. Most of us, in the modern world, we try to brush it off. Tell ourselves we're just being paranoid. But I learned the hard way, you never ignore it. The story I'm about to tell is why. This one comes from South Africa. If you know the area, especially around Kruger National Park, you know it's famous for game farms and lodges. It's where nature rules, and the line between safety and danger is razor thin. This incident happened at a 4-star lodge. It used to be a stunning place near the southern tip of Kruger. For 5 years, it was my spot. Me and my wife, my girlfriend at the time, we loved it. The main area was beautiful, pool, restaurant, and these tented chalets spread out in the bush. They were designed for total privacy. The furthest one, a full kilometer from the restaurant, was always our choice. You couldn't see your neighbors. The only sound you heard was the call of the wild. But that paradise was fading. Sadly, the lodge had fallen on hard times. You could feel it. The paint was peeling, a few lights were out, and the silence, it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt empty, isolated. The weekend this happened, that feeling was strong. Friday night, only 2 of the 25+ chalets were taken. By Saturday night, it was just us. The entire massive lodge, and just us. It was starting to feel a little uneasy. It got worse when the manager stopped by Saturday morning, said he had a family thing, and he was leaving the farm for the weekend. He said, "If you two need anything, just help yourselves to the restaurant fridge and leave a note. You can settle up next week." It sounded great. We had the pool and the jacuzzi to ourselves. But what it also meant was that we were completely, utterly alone. No staff, no manager, no one. We tried to shake it off, left to visit Kruger for most of the day. We got back around 3 p.m. The second I stepped out of the car, it hit me. It was scorching hot, 95 degrees, 35 degrees Celsius. But I had goosebumps, my whole body tensed. There it was, that feeling of being watched. We parked about 150 meters from the chalet and had to walk a small path. And that's when I saw them. The boot prints? Not ours. My girlfriend and I, our tracks from that morning, they were light sneakers. These were heavy tread, big man boot prints, pressed deep into the dust, right on top of our tracks. Someone had walked down this dead-end path, knowing exactly where we were. I signaled for my girlfriend to stop. My heart was hammering. I crept forward, and I noticed the most chilling part. The tracks went around the chalet, and then back out, up the path. They didn't try to get in. They just came to look, to scout. And they knew we weren't there. Everything inside the chalet seemed fine. But we couldn't shake it. We went for a swim, got back to the chalet around 5:30. I started the fire for the barbecues. But the atmosphere was broken. My girlfriend and I, we were both on edge and just silent. We were just going through the motions. The crackling of the fire seemed too loud. Every rustle in the bush, every snapped twig made both of us jump. Nasum. That feeling, it wasn't going away. It was hanging in the air, heavy, just waiting for the sun to go down. We sat down to eat around 8 p.m. The barbecue was ready on the plates, but neither of us was moving. Most of the food wasn't even served. The air was so heavy, you could feel it, pressing down on your shoulders. The silence was suffocating. This romantic dinner now felt like a trap. Finally, I looked at my girlfriend. She wasn't just nervous. She looked sick, pale. Her eyes were locked on a spot in the darkness, somewhere just behind me. I asked, "Are you okay?" Her voice just cracked. It was a trembling whisper. "Babe, I have a really bad feeling. A really bad feeling. I think we have to go." That was it. That moment. Every bit of denial in me vanished. I didn't try to reassure her. I didn't say she was overreacting, because I was feeling the exact same thing. I looked her right in the eye and said, "Me too. We need to leave. Right now." I emphasized every word. Not after we eat. Not packing up. We leave right now. The next second was controlled chaos. We threw the food into the cooler. I don't even remember if I closed it. We grabbed our bags, the car keys. We didn't walk to the car, we ran. That 150-meter path, in the dark, felt like a mile. My back was just frozen, waiting for someone to come bursting out of the bush, right behind us. We jumped in the car. I hit the locks. The engine roared, tearing the quiet night apart. I didn't reverse. I spun the car right there, tires grinding on the gravel. I floored it, down that 2-kilometer dirt road to the gate, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights chasing us. When we got through the gate, dropped the key in the box, and hit the tar road, the fear slowly began to fade. We drove the 150 kilometers home, in silence. We slept in our own bed that night, safe, but we still didn't know just how lucky we had been. Sunday morning, we woke up in our apartment. Everything felt normal. Sunlight, the sound of traffic. It felt like the night before was just a bad nightmare, one you were lucky to wake up from. We were both secretly thinking it. Maybe we overreacted. Maybe it was just a local who got lost, or we were just being paranoid. We tried to have a normal Sunday, but that feeling, it was still just lingering. And then, around 4 p.m., my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was the number, from the lodge. My heart just dropped into my stomach. I answered, and I knew instantly. The manager's voice wasn't normal. He didn't ask how I was. He was almost yelling, his voice cracking with panic. His first question, "Are you two okay?" "My God, where are you?" I said. "We're fine. We're at home." "What's wrong?" There was a pause. I could just hear him breathing, hard. Then he said, "The lodge. It's been hit." He started explaining, and my blood ran cold. This wasn't a petty theft. This was an invasion. A group of 5 men had come in. They ransacked the main area, tore it apart. They took TVs, liquor, money. Anything they couldn't take, they destroyed, smashed, ripped. But that wasn't the part that made me shake. The manager's voice broke. "They went to one of the chalets," he said. "Just one." I stopped breathing. "They went to yours. They turned everything upside down. It was like they were looking for you." That feeling. From 3 p.m. yesterday, it all came rushing back. The boot prints. They weren't random. They had seen us. They knew we were the only ones there. They knew the manager was gone. They were watching us, waiting. Those tracks, leading away, they were going back to get the rest of them. The manager went on. He said the lodge had security cameras at the main area, but not at our remote chalet. He checked the footage. And this is the detail that haunts me to this day. Remember, we left at 8 p.m. I checked the clock in the car. It took us about 10 minutes to race down that 2-kilometer dirt road. So we were completely off the farm by about 8:20 p.m. The security camera picked up the first movement at the main lodge just before 8:30 p.m. Do you understand? 10 minutes. We got out of there by 10 minutes. They were already there. They were hiding in the bush, probably just yards away, watching us barbecue, watching us panic pack. They were waiting, probably just waiting, for us to turn the lights off and go to sleep. And then the manager added one last detail. On the footage, at least one of them had a firearm. Several others were carrying machetes. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking. I just sat down, hard, on the floor. What if we had stayed? What if my girlfriend hadn't said anything? What if I'd brushed it off, said, "Let's just finish dinner"? We were completely alone. No cell service at the chalet. The nearest person was 2 miles away, as the crow flies. We would have screamed, and no one would have heard. We would have been trapped. 2 of us, against 5 armed men. Needless to say, we didn't go to remote places for a long time. That lodge, our old paradise, it went bankrupt not long after that. It's just abandoned now, taken back by the bush. But the lesson that stayed, we both had that feeling. From 3 p.m., But we both stayed quiet, for one stupid reason. We didn't want to ruin the other person's weekend. We almost died from being polite. So, trust your gut. Trust the feeling of the person next to you. If something deep inside you is screaming, something is wrong, you listen to it. It's not paranoia, it's survival. And it just saved our lives. 19 is a weird age. You're old enough to drive yourself for hours, but still stupid enough to believe nothing really bad can happen to you. My boyfriend at the time, Johnny, and I were living proof of that. We were young, and we had our thing: long drives, loud music, and smoking weed. Just aimless roads. It was fun. It was our thing. One night, Johnny gets an idea. He suggests we go see the Devil's Tree in New Jersey. We found it on a website called weirdnewjersey.com, which was basically an online catalog of nightmares. A list of haunted, cursed places you could actually visit. And that night, the Devil's Tree was our destination. We gathered the essentials, snacks, drinks, and our supplies for the road. We took off. It was about an hour-and-a-half drive to this little town that I swear doesn't even exist on a map. The drive there, like always, was fun. We were laughing, singing along to the radio, and that sweet smoke was filling up the small car. Everything was perfect. Until we arrived. Instantly, the air just got thick. The place wasn't just empty. It was dead. It looked like farmland, abandoned for decades. It was the middle of the night, and the fog was so thick. Our headlights were just these two dull spots, trying to punch through a white wall. We got out of the car. The cold hit instantly, and then we saw it, the Devil's Tree. It was terrifying. It didn't look like any tree I'd ever seen. It was massive, warped, bare branches reaching out like broken fingers. And true to the legend, there were a few old, frayed ropes dangling from the limbs. But the worst part was the silence. A heavy, absolute silence. It was so quiet, your ears start to ring, just searching for a sound. A pit started to form in my stomach. I didn't know this place. And I have to be clear about this. Johnny was not street smart. He was a rich kid, sheltered, daddy paid for everything. His mindset was totally different from mine. He saw an adventure. Having been around the block, saw a trap. We got back in the car, that awful silence just clinging to us. And that's when we made the stupidest decision of the night. The one that almost got us both killed. We decided to find a spot, to park, to chill, roll a joint, make out a little bit. We found this deserted dirt road, pitch black, leading into nothing. This area made my skin crawl. My paranoia, as Johnny always called it, was kicking in. I hit the locks on all the doors. The click echoed, dry, in the fog. I bent down, started to roll the joint, trying to ignore the prickling feeling on the back of my neck, that someone was out there, in the dark, watching us. I hadn't even licked the paper. In that thick silence, a sound. Click, click, a dry metallic sound. Someone was turning the handle on John's side. They were testing the lock. My heart just stopped, and right after, bam! A fist hit the window so hard the whole car shook. I screamed, "John, turn on the lights! Turn on the fucking lights!" He fumbled, slapped at the dashboard, and the headlights flashed on. The light cut through the fog, and my blood froze. Standing right there was a man. No, he wasn't a man. He was a mountain. He was 6'4", a ripped flannel shirt, and filthy overalls. He had this wild beard, and his eyes. Oh God, his eyes. Empty, but just burning with pure rage. And then Johnny did the stupidest thing. The thing I will never forgive him for. He cracked the window, just a sliver. Why? To talk to him? Instantly, the smell hit the car. Cheap booze, sour sweat, and just fury. "What the hell are you doing out here?" the man roared. His voice was gravel. "Get out of the car, now! You gonna do her? You think you're gonna party on my land?" He was screaming, frantic, and his massive, shovel-sized hand gripped the top of the window like he could just rip it off. I was frozen, and Johnny, somehow, smiled. A big, dopey, stupid, rich kid grin. He tried to explain. We were looking at the Devil's Tree and just programming our GPS to get home. "I'm sorry. Man," he said, "I didn't know I was on your land. We'll go, but we're not getting out of the car." That little bit of defiance, that man, it was like a switch. The giant's eyes left John, and they found me. He bent down low, his grotesque face just inches from mine. Through the glass, I could see every broken blood vessel in his eyes. I was about to scream, "Drive," when two more sets of headlights flashed on. Not in front, behind us. Out of the dark, two massive beat-up pickup trucks. They pulled in, blocking us completely. And the beds? The beds were full of men, all dressed just like him. A guy from the truck yelled, "You got a problem?" The giant, by our window, didn't even turn. His attention was glued to me. "They're gonna party on my land," he said. His voice went all sick and low. "What are you gonna do with that condom?" he asked, bending down, focusing on me. "Do you realize your boyfriend is digging your grave?" The tears came, hot and terrified. I started begging, stammering, trying to be polite. "We weren't going to have sex. We don't have. We're just trying to get out of here. Please." I was terrified. This wasn't an angry farmer. This was a trap. And we were in it. The man took a breath, almost a sigh, like we were an annoyance. He was about to have to clean up. His voice dropped to almost a whisper far more terrifying than the roar. "I could kill you both. Right here," he said. "Bury you, and no one would ever find you. You," he nodded at me, "you're lucky your girlfriend has some sense. Get out of here. Get, before I change my mind." That was all I needed. The panic in me just exploded. "John, go now!" I shrieked, like magic. John's stun broke. He floored it. The engine roared, tires screaming in the mud. The car leaped, and we shot into the dark, flying as fast as we could down that pitch-black dirt road. My heart was going to explode. We had no idea where we were going. And right then, as we were tearing, a figure, out of nowhere, our headlights hit. A woman. She was wild, stringy hair, and she was holding a gun. She was standing right in the middle of the road, raising it, trying to block us. I will never forget what John said, through his teeth, in this terrifyingly calm voice. "I'll hit her if I have to." In that same instant, my own survival kicked in. I wasn't the crying girl in the passenger seat anymore. I dove into the back, hands grabbing, feeling for anything. John's dad's construction company. Tools. My hand closed on something heavy. Metal. A hammer. I gripped it, ready to smash the window and fight. John didn't slow down. He aimed right for her. She was screaming, just vile curses on the wind. "You're not going anywhere," she shrieked. A millisecond before we hit her, she dove out of the way. We fishtailed past, the car sliding in the mud. I looked in the side mirror, and my stomach clenched. Headlights. Both trucks. They were coming after us. We were being hunted. "Turn, turn," I screamed. John cranked the wheel into a random turn, totally ignoring the GPS voice that was trying to get us home. We didn't need home. We needed out. We flew down back roads until, thank God, we saw the glow of the highway. We shot up the on-ramp and merged into traffic, into the safety of the civilized world. We drove in silence for a long time, both of us hyperventilating, the adrenaline still pumping. When we were far enough away, the anger just boiled up in me. "We almost died," I said, my voice shaking. "You can't be stupid, cocky, with people like that. You made it worse." And John, you know what he did? He laughed, a high-pitched, nervous giggle. "Fuck him. We're fine." But I knew him. That's how he acted when he was terrified. And that attitude, that dopey smile, that's what set that man off. We drove home, the relief slowly replacing the horror. But one thing never left me. It was that man's eyes. The way he looked at me. The way he asked those sick, sexual questions like he was picturing it. It had to be a family living on that property. The trucks, the woman with the gun. They showed up too fast. Like this is what they do. We never went back. We stopped going to weird New Jersey spots altogether. The game was over. But even now, years later, I still get a chill, thinking about what would have happened if John didn't hit the gas, and what would have happened if that woman had hit the tires